60 Minutes, Rewind.
It's probably the most recognizable face in American letters. Tom Wolfe, the man in the white suit whose new novel, A Man in Full, became the best-selling book in America only 2 days after it went on sale. Like all of Wolfe's work, from his look at the astronauts in The Right Stuff to his look at New Yorkers behaving badly in Bonfire of the Vanities, it is unsparing in its brutally detailed description of American life. Wolfe's new book places Atlanta and the new Southern aristocracy under his microscope. One reviewer said of him, he understands the human animal like no one else. A good man to talk to about the tone of our time at the end of the millennium.
Every age has a certain moral tone. And no matter how you try to lead your life, you are going to be affected by that moral tone. You don't have any choice. We are heading towards the total eclipse of all values. Now, don't get me wrong. As a writer, I'm perfectly delighted for things to remain the way they are. I mean, the human comedy has never been richer.
No, this is not Tom Wolfe's living room, though it would be completely in character. It is the new reading room of the New York Public Library, a fitting place for a man of many words. He is conservative in his own life, yet, as he says, he delights in the folly of everyone else.
No more than 35 years ago, if any major public figure in the United States had gotten up to a microphone and said, you know, we should have in this country an institution known as the co-ed dorm, in which downy, nubile young things and young men in the season of the rising sap shall live together, not only in the same building, but along the same halls and using the same shower rooms. Well, such a person would have been looked at as if his eyebrows had been eaten away by weevils.
All wonderful grist for the Wolfian mill. Declining or just changing styles make for delicious confusion.
And the current trend is what leads to so many bad marriages. I mean, the poor girl doesn't realize, can't tell whether the boy is the heir to a computer fortune or the second drummer in a rock band, because they all dress and they all talk alike. Formal dress lives on, usually on the backs of doormen and elevator men in New York. The doormen look like 1870 Austrian army colonels, and the tenants look like refugees from a bad film.
Does that displease you, or are you able to accept this as a constantly changing panorama for you?
Personally, it displeases me a great deal. I think there's a real purpose to formality. There's a real purpose to telling people how you expect to be treated.
No one defines himself more clearly than Tom Wolfe, striding white-suited in all seasons through the gritty streets of New York. He appears to be some throwback, perhaps to more mannerly days. In fact, he uses words like weapons, as in his dissection of the ruling class in Bonfire of the Vanities.
You WASP charity ballers sitting on your mounds of inherited money up in your co-ops with the 12-foot ceilings, and you German Jewish financiers who have finally made it into the same buildings, the better to insulate yourselves from the shtetl hordes.
What role do business leaders play in society now?
Business leaders, I find, actually play very little role. I think would be wonderful if business leaders would weigh into not only political questions, but moral questions. Right now, they're afraid to do it.
You've said they appoint themselves or see to it or buy their way into cultural institutions.
That is the new religion for educated and well-to-do people. Today, any business leader who publicly announced his religious activity would be considered an idiot. You just don't do that. And what do you do now to prove your spiritual worthiness? You try to become a member of the museum board. You know, it's the art museum that certifies your spiritual worthiness today.
At the age of 68, Tom Wolfe, like his latest title, is a man in full. Domestically content, at the summit of a brilliant career. life lived at a gentle, measured pace. Personal correspondence written by hand in copperplate style, making the simple business of opening a letter from him a small joy. His word processor is rooted firmly out of cyberspace. But with Wolffian glee, he relishes the newest of the new social theories.
There's a study out that shows that not only are men genetically polygamous, unable to be faithful, they have no choice in the matter, but women are genetically wired so that they will fall for rich or prominent men. I used to think this was conniving on their part, but it's not. This is a purely genetic process, and if they are, if they're caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, they can just say, "Well, look, it wasn't me. I'm just a lifeguard in the gene pool."
Wolfe's own life is spectacularly private. Married to the same woman for 20 years, 2 children now in their teens. His own gene pool includes some strains of Southern gentry. His youth was spent comfortably in Richmond, Virginia. His mother taught him about art. His father inspired his interest in writing. Wolfe went to Yale, earned a Ph.D., and hoped on graduation to start the great American novel.
The next month, I'm writing obituaries in some town called Springfield, Massachusetts. And I never knew from day to day what kind of story I was going to be put on. It made you realize that you can go up to total strangers and ask them questions that you have no right to expect them to answer.
From the Springfield Union to every American reporter's dream back then, the New York Herald Tribune, the writer's paper. He helped invent something called the new journalism, in which the reporter's impressions became part of the story. A 1970 report called Radical Chic was a landmark. In excruciating detail, he described a party thrown for the Black Panthers by Park Avenue liberals.
These are nice. Little Roquefort cheese morsels rolled in crushed nuts. Very tasty, very subtle. It's the way the dry sackiness of the nuts tiptoes up against the dour savor of the cheese that's so nice, so subtle. Wonder what the Black Panthers eat here on the hors d'oeuvre trail.
There is that slightly jaundiced eye looking at every aspect, every detail, every collar button, the kind of napkins on the table, and somehow making these, what some might regard as extraneous details, reveal the character of the sort of person who lives in that environment.
I will confess to the occasional thrust of satire.
He wasn't the fly on the wall at the party. He was a dapper and hungry wasp on the wall.
People looked at me with a kind of hostility they couldn't do anything about. And why I found this enjoyable, I can't tell you.
The story will continue after this.
Clothes may not make the man, but they go a long way in describing him. Meticulous is probably the word.
My impression is it's riding up a little bit right there.
Mr. Nicolosi, his tailor, would agree.
Beautiful. Look nice.
His suits cover the full spectrum of white, from cream to a lighter shade of pale. And he does not apologize for his foppishness.
Well, as Mark Twain once said, he was someone who enjoyed white suits. And he said, one thing I would hate to be is conspicuous. He says, but I do want to be noticed.
Noticed he is. A new Wolfe book is both a cultural and social event. The full New York literary industrial complex faithfully pays homage. Just the kind of party you'd want Tom Wolfe to cover, the way he covered Upper East Side vanities or the macho world of astronauts in The Right Stuff. Speaking of which, Tom Wolfe still seems to have it.
Thank you very much.
In A Man in Full, he is as sharp and acid as ever.
He was only 44, but already running to fat. His head popped up out of his blazer and his polo shirt like a bubble. His skin was pallid and pasty. A few strands of hair the color of orange juice stains skimmed back across his otherwise bald pate.
Just over 2 years ago, still writing A Man in Full, it looked like Tom Wolfe was washed up for good. A massive heart attack. In Bonfire of the Vanities, Wolfe could have been describing his own last gasp.
A man dying. Oh, mortality. Probably a heart attack, too. That deep fear lodged in the bosom of practically every man in the room. The old arteries were clogging up. And was that the way it would look? Would you be lying on the floor in some public place with a blue circle around your mouth and cloudy eyes that were half open and 100% dead?
Quintuple bypass surgery saved his life and changed it.
I think I will enjoy every moment a little more. You know, if you count, I want to ask you to do this. You're indestructible at heart, but count how many days you think you have left. Or don't count how many days you think you have left. It's rather grimly small, that number. You know, you tend to say thousands.
Thousands.
It's quite humbling to know that despite all of your aspirations, all of your dreams, and all of the talents you think you have, you're made of clay. As the Stoic Epictetus used to say, you're nothing but a piece of crockery and a quart of blood. And it gives a whole other meaning to the word soul. I think your soul is your relationships with other people. And that's the part of you that really doesn't die, and you suddenly begin to treasure those things. That was my experience anyway, in a way you never did before.